Thank you, everybody, very much. So today we'll continue with the text we're looking at, but the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. But before we do that, of course, we'll adjust our motivation, reflect on that, and engage in some quiet practice involving the breath. After that, we'll engage with the chapter in the text on the varieties of action, the varieties of karma. Yeah, chapter 14 in the English translation. So please, first of all, make sure you're comfortable with an upright posture is good, with level shoulders and the head tilted slightly forwards, downwards. Make sure you have a good, solid foundation to the posture, that the legs are comfortable. Cross-legged is good. If you're sitting on a chair, then it's good if both palms of your feet, the soles of your feet, are on the ground. Arms relaxed by the side of your body, but with a gap between your torso and arms. Hands can be in the lap or on the thighs, knees. Eyes can be closed or very slightly open. There's many aspects to the posture, but we like to emphasize 2 points here. One, it is upright, so psychologically speaking, you could say it reflects an inner attitude of confidence, self-confidence, which is very necessary. In Mahayana Buddhism, we speak of having a very vast kind of vision. In other words, to generate an awakened mind, the awakened mind of a Buddha, in order to benefit others. So this is a very ambitious, very vast kind of aspiration we have. And obviously it involves a lot of hard work, you could say. That's kind of a, understatement. So we need tremendous endurance, courage, confidence. So the uprightness kind of reminds us of that. The second part is that the front of the body in this posture is naturally open. So, we are totally willing to work with the world, engage with others in this world, to work with them, to help them where necessary, as much as we can. So the front of the body is open, it's exposed, the heart is exposed. We're not using our spiritual practice to hide or to just insulate ourselves because of being upset with life or with the world or with other people. We're not doing that at all. So this is something to remember. Although Buddha, of course, gave many, many teachings suited to different dispositions. one main disposition, one main kind of teaching is the teachings that help us to attain individual, personal liberation, liberation from suffering, from samsara, the cyclic, vicious kind of cyclic, uncontrolled death rebirth process. But the other teachings is that attaining that kind of liberation for ourselves alone is not sufficient, is a kind of limited aim, we could say. So if we can, we should strive for full awakening of Buddhahood, which means that we are continuously working for the benefit of others, continuously, until all beings are liberated, until we have led all beings to the enlightenment of a Buddha. Okay. So for that, we need obviously great courage, great endurance, great patience, and great loving kindness and compassion. So we start with where we are. Obviously, we are not yet beings with those kind of qualities, but we can begin by opening up to others. So this is not so difficult to make the first few steps, because all we have to do is open our eyes and be aware of what's happening in the world and in our own life. And we see plenty of instances of deep trouble, malaise, great misfortune, great unhappiness, misery. And since we know that everybody wants to be happy, nobody deliberately seeks pain. So we know that others could benefit greatly from proper help, guidance. They need that. From the Buddhist perspective, we would say they need to know how to create the causes for happiness and how to avoid the causes for sorrow. Hmm. So reflecting in this way, we could think how wonderful it would be if beings were separated from suffering and its causes, and were to abide in happiness, having investigated and put into practice the causes for happiness and liberation. And think how wonderful it would be if we ourselves could help beings to do that. And then we can reflect that in order to be of any benefit to others, we need to have straightened out our own mind, as it were, made our own body and mind suitable, adequate for the task at hand. So for that, we need basically to have great wisdom, great compassion. And even before that, we need to have a mind that is somewhat tamed, is not totally distracted. We need to have some kind of attentional skill, the ability to focus. So with that in mind, we will engage in the breath awareness practice for a little while. So here we simply become aware of the sensation of breath at the tip of our nostrils as we breathe naturally in and out, just natural breath, breathing, being aware of the sensation. And when the thoughts come, we recognize and do not follow them. We just let them go and come back to the breath. However often we need to do that, we do that with a calm, clear, relaxed mind. very calm, clear, sense of being relaxed, but also attentive. Okay, so let's continue with this text. This great text, which puts together in a graded way, graduated way, the path to enlightenment. It would take a bit long to give a background for newcomers, but the author has put together in a relatively concise way all of the main teachings which need to be followed, need to be practiced, from proper reliance on the spiritual teacher, from teachings on how to approach the dharma, the teachings, how to listen, and so forth. And then the topics of understanding properly how valuable this particular kind of rebirth is, this kind of human life, precious human life, with its opportunities, for practice. And then we looked at death and impermanence, and to a certain extent, in the context of reflecting on what happens, what kind of rebirth states can occur after death. We looked at that, at some of them. And then we've come to the section on actions, on karma. So the understanding in Buddhism is that results have causes, Nothing just happens totally randomly. Of course, you might say, if there's a gust of wind, 25. Well, not exactly, not karma in the way we're talking here. Karma here means action, which has intention and various things which we're going to look into now. So we're not talking about certain natural effects in the world. But of course, we're inhabiting this world, we humans. So we could say, collectively, of course, we have created some karma to be in this world together. That we have done. So let's look at this. And of course, the reason we are engaging in this investigation has been put very clearly by the author, Lama Tsongkhapa, who completed this text in 1402. So it's, from modern people's point of view, quite old, although it's quite recent from Indian Tibetan Buddhist point of view. Buddhism was established in Tibet very strongly in the 7th, 8th centuries. So 1402 is quite late. So he's now going to talk about, the previous chapter he talked about general characteristics of karma, that karma is definite, that it increases, magnitude of karma increases with time, that we don't meet with the results of actions which we have not committed, and that which we have engaged in, that will give its result. Karmic causes created will give their result, unless they are purified. So it's like, the idea is that if we plant seeds and we leave them and the conditions ripen, then the seeds will give their results. So of course, if they are nice, good, positive seeds, then we want the result to ripen. If they are unwholesome seeds, which can give deleterious results, suffering results, then we want to do something about it. We want to uproot those seeds, burn them up, whatever. But if we don't, then the result will at some point manifest. The seed will at some point germinate and give its fruit. So that the previous chapter spoke about that in brief. Now we have to look at specific actions, specific unwholesome actions, what they constitute, and so forth. So Tsongkhapa says, what sorts of actions and effects should I initially develop certainty about? Because if we don't develop certainty about these things, then we won't engage in proper practice, won't have the right attitude. We can't be, sitting on the fence all the time. In other words, he says very clearly, what should I adopt? What should I practice? And what should I cast aside? What should I practice? What should I stop doing or cast aside? So we can engage in positive and unwholesome conduct with our body, with our speech, and mentally. Although there's a vast number of different kinds of actions we can engage in, obviously. Briefly speaking, the most important unwholesome actions can be reduced to 10, and you could say them, in other words, 10, and then the opposite of those are the main wholesome actions that can be engaged in. So he taught that the main, or as it's put here in the text on page 216, the extremely great foundations for a misdeed, for an unwholesome action, are the 10 non-virtuous actions. When you give up these 10 actions, then you do adopt virtuous actions. So therefore, the 10 are taught initially, and everything is connected with these 10. He quotes one of the texts saying that if you practice in this way, these actions of guarding your speech, being restrained mentally, and not committing not committing physical non-virtues, if you do that, then you will achieve the path, the spiritual path taught by the Buddha. So once we know these 10 non-virtuous actions and their effects, we restrain ourselves from even being, motivated to commit them, let alone committing them. We don't allow ourselves to be motivated to commit them. And this kind of practice is indispensable, he says, as the basis for all of the Buddhist teachings, all of the paths, whether we want to engage in practices emphasizing attaining nirvana for ourselves, or whether we want to emphasize the path of Mahayana, which leads to, a generation of this mind of awakening, wanting to become a Buddha in order to benefit others. Or whether we engage in the esoteric Vajrayana practices, all of them have this as a foundation. The point being that, if we don't restrain ourselves, if we don't avoid the 10 unwholesome actions, then we will be creating the kind of actions that lead to miserable states of rebirth. And most likely also we will experience much good fortune or happiness in this life if we behave in a very unrestrained way. So this is the foundation, behaving well with our body, our speech, our mind, avoiding unwholesomeness. This, of course, is not something unique in, you could say, to Buddhism, but here, this particular kind of teaching is unique in terms of the detail into which we go, explaining exactly what is meant by these 10 non-virtuous actions. You know? Because we could be quite vague about it, what it constitutes. Here, this text, these teachings are very, very clear. What constitutes killing, what constitutes stealing, etc. Everything is going to be explained very carefully. So this is a foundational practice. So people who say, well, karma, maybe not. Of course, it's mixed up with a lot of things nowadays. It's almost a political, would you say political? Yeah. It's certainly mixed up with, in India at least, the caste factor, with certain views about religion, because the law of karma has been used as a sort of a political tool, to keep people in their place, you could say. Upper castes in India, for example, have used the logic that, you're born as an untouchable or whatever because of karma. And of course, suffering comes from unwholesome causes. Happiness comes from wholesome causes, but it's taught and used in a way that is demeaning and which is exploitative. And of course, the person who is given this kind of teaching is told, spoken to in that way, is obviously going to have a strong reaction against these kind of teachings. If you're told, it's your karma to be born poor or of a certain caste, so you just do your duty, do what I'm telling you, and maybe you'll have a better rebirth in future. Obviously, this is a misuse of this teaching. Although karma may be true. I mean, I believe it to be something, it's a reality. It's not something invented by Buddha or by Hindus or anybody. It's the law. It's the law of the universe. But it can be misused and has been misused in the past to just continue with kind of exploitative structure. Yeah. Or it can be used in a way where people say, well, it's your karma, it's your fate, you can't do anything about it. That would be a misunderstanding of karma. Anyway, there's a lot in this text. We're not going to read everything, quote everything. But Tsongkhapa does quote Chandrakirti, who's a very important Buddhist scholar. He says there are no causes of certain goodness. Certain goodness refers to the certainty of happiness in human realms and so forth. There's no certainty of that, or of high status as a human. There's no certainty without the causes of ethical discipline. Ethical discipline is the cause that creates these states. So this is something to reflect on. We might think, oh, well, I'm born into this kind of family or with these kind of circumstances in life, which are basically very good, very amazing compared to, most beings. and one may just take it for granted. But according to the teachings, we've created the causes, some very excellent causes, to experience this kind of result. It doesn't just come by chance. So Chandrakirti says there are no causes of certain goodness or high status apart from ethical discipline. In other words, refraining from these 10 unwholesome actions we're going to talk about, and if possible, of course, engaging in the opposite of these 10. That pretty much ensures good human opportunities in the future, which is then the basis for practices leading to liberation, practices leading to enlightenment. Does that make sense? Does it sound reasonably logical? Of course, it might. If you have a real difficulty with the continuity of consciousness, in other words, the fact that the mind is not considered simply to be a part of the body or brain, if you think that the mind cannot possibly, or consciousness cannot possibly exist after physical death, then you will have a challenge with these teachings. So then, as Buddha said, it's up to you to investigate more, study more. But as we said last time on Monday, in Monday's teaching, not good to reject anything outright without checking more, Buddha said, don't accept what I say necessarily, but he didn't say reject it outright without investigating. So we need to engage in a lot of thinking and reflecting based on, many texts, many reasonings and accounts. And then we can have maybe a broader understanding of continuity of consciousness. Repeatedly guard your ethical discipline by maintaining a sense of restraint. And here he's taking, he's taking a dig at people who must have existed in the early 15th century. There are some who have no such restraint, even with regard to a single practice of ethical discipline, and yet who still say, I'm a practitioner of the Mahayana. So this is very dishonorable. Mahayana, this vast attitude of wanting to benefit countless, living beings, to say that we are Mahayanist with that kind of attitude and yet not able to keep our discipline at all well, this Tsongkhapa says is very dishonorable, obviously. So there is a sense of integrity is being spoken of. This is one of the signs of this what's called degenerate era, that it's much harder for people to maintain ethical discipline. There's so much degeneration in the world, in people's minds. It's because of people's minds, right, that we have a world with so many problems. It's not caused by animals or by nature alone. The main factor is human consciousness and what it prompts us to engage in. Due to ignorance, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, all of these things, they cause us to behave in these ways that are harming everybody now. So anyway, so ethical discipline is the foundation. Tsongkhapa quotes the Kshitigarbha Sutra. Kshitigarbha is one of the 8 main bodhisattvas. by means of these 10 paths of virtuous action, you will become a Buddha, fully awakened person. However, there are those who, for as long as they live, they don't even minimally maintain even a single path of virtuous action properly, but who say such things as, I'm a Mahayana practitioner, I'm seeking unexcelled perfect enlightenment. So such people are great hypocrites and liars. They deceive the world in the presence of all the Buddha Bhagavans, and they preach nihilism. When they die, they seem confused, and they will fall into miserable realms. All these teachings, I would say, attack our normal conventional attitudes, our complacency, our feeling very smug and satisfied sometimes about the kind of life we are leading. Basically, these teachings are kind of a bombshell. Because let's face it, often we just behave in certain ways, which we feel we are entitled to, do what we want. We have a kind of arrogance. Of course, we also have habitual bad habits. We have some habitual good habits as well, of course. But we also have habits that are not so useful, which harm ourselves, harm others. And we don't care that much very often. We don't really care that much. And so, from Buddhist perspective, that's very dangerous. Because in the future we have to reap the reward of this kind of behavior. So when the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they look at sentient beings with tremendous sadness, really, it is said. Because they see how wanting happiness, it's like we just don't know how to stop engaging in non-virtue. We don't know how to properly create the causes of lasting happiness. In a way, we don't really care. In the sense, we're careless. And we don't have the understanding. We haven't received the teachings or bothered to investigate the teachings that show so clearly how karma works and therefore how we should behave. So now there are the section on non-virtuous actions and their effects. What are non-virtuous actions? And what is a non-virtuous action? We have to know exactly. And what are their effects? So this will take up, we won't finish this session. There's a lot of discussion here, but it's very useful for us because then we can look at our own life and check how it measures up compared to what these teachings are saying. Okay, we won't get to the effects today by any means, but we'll look at the 10 non-virtuous actions, begin to look at them. Okay, any questions so far? Or something you want to say? No? Yes? Anybody online want to say? Okay, let's carry on. So first we have killing. The first unwholesome action is killing. What is killing? Now, this text goes into it in great detail, and I doubt very much if any of you have notebooks and so forth. But anyways, it's good just to hear this, and then you can investigate more. it's taught in 5 categories in some of the teachings: the basis, the perception, the attitude, the affliction or the klesh, the disturbed attitude involved, and the conclusion. However, we can condense the middle 3 into the category of attitude. In other words, perception, attitude, affliction, they're all connected with the motivation or attitude. Yeah. So we have the basis, we have the attitude, we have an action, and what's called a culmination. It'll become clearer as we go through it. Okay, what is the basis? What do we mean by the basis in this teaching on what is killing? The basis is a being. A basis of killing is a being, a living being who is alive. It doesn't mean, a carrot or a tree or anything like that. It's talking about a being with a consciousness, what is called a consciousness, what is acknowledged as a consciousness. Animal, human, pret, hell being, demigod, God, any of these kind of beings, they have consciousness. We wouldn't say that potatoes, carrots, beans, plants like that have that kind of consciousness. So we are not killing if we uproot a carrot and boil it. Thank goodness. That doesn't constitute killing. Of course, randomly cutting trees and so on and so forth is obviously a negative action, actually, because of the aggression involved and the environmental effects and so forth. But it's not the karma of killing. It is not killing. So we can't speak technically in Buddhism of killing a tree in this sense. It dies, we could say the tree dies, but this is not karma of killing. Okay, so a being who is alive, another living being, although killing ourselves also is a negative karma, suicide is a negative karma, but here it's mainly talking about someone else. So there is a perceiving. Then it goes into great details, to make sure that we know exactly what we mean by perception. Okay, karma of killing involves a being. Then what do we mean by the category of perception? There are 4 types of perception here spoken of. Perceiving a living being to be a living being. Okay, that's accurate. We may perceive a living being not to be a living being. We may not understand it properly and kill a small animal or something, thinking it's not a living being. Third, perceiving what is not a living being not to be a living being. So that is correct. That's a correct perception. So carrot or mushroom, we perceive it to not be a living being because it's not a living being. It's correct. Fourth, perceiving what is not a living being to be a living being. So that's inaccurate. So we might say, well, or this plant, which is not a living being in this categorization, we might consider it a living being. So then we don't touch it or do anything to it because we feel it will be the karma of killing. But that's not the karma of killing as is meant here, because karma of killing here means what? Living being with a consciousness, a being who is alive. So we need accurate perception, in other words. if at the time of the actual performance of the action of killing, the killer has a general motivation, thinking that no matter what happens, he or she will kill, then an accurate perception is not necessary. This is getting technical. I'm not going to go into that bit. Okay, let's look at the third thing, which is the affliction. So we've had basically the basis is a living being. We have to properly, understand that. Okay, then, and we perceived it correctly. Okay, so let's take a specific example. Somebody, we'll take a historical example. Well, it's a slightly contentious one in the sense that there's no clear consensus on who was involved totally. But let's take killing of John F. Kennedy in November 1963, which I happen to remember because even though I was only 7 years old, it's something a lot of people remember. The newspaper, I mean, I wasn't there in Dallas, Texas, but it was a very big event, very huge event in 1963, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So, okay, so the person who decided to kill Kennedy, okay, they have the basis is John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, okay. There's a motivation involved, there's a motivation. There's an attitude, there's an attitude. There's a motivation for killing, which is not compassion or love or anything like that, It's basically aggression, might have been also involved with greed. And of course, ignorance is involved. The basic ignorance, fundamental ignorance, you could say, not understanding correctly how things exist. Many factors are there. But ignorance, of course, is the root of all of this unwholesome behavior. Then, as for the performance, okay, the action of killing, it makes no difference whether the performers do it themselves or cause somebody else to do it. This is interesting. So there's one or more people who shot at Kennedy. Some say definitely more than one. Historically, mainly one person has been, blamed, but and who was later killed before he could be tried. Yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald. But the people who engineered it, obviously, it wasn't just one person who decided to kill Kennedy. There were people behind it. So they also share the karma. And then the nature of the performance is killing by way of a weapon, poison, or, whatever. What is called the culmination or the completion of the action is the death of Kennedy. Say Lee Harvey Oswald, it's pretty sure he also did fire. Definitely, he was one of the main people. He shot, it caused Kennedy to die. If Lee Harvey Oswald had had a heart attack at the moment of pulling the trigger or just after, and had died, you could say, before Kennedy died, say Kennedy had the wound, he didn't die immediately. Say the guy who shot him died first due to some reason, falling out of the window of the book depository or, a policeman or someone shooting him. If he died first, he wouldn't accumulate fully the karma of killing, even though Kennedy died. So you see, if I die first, having shot you, it's not the karma of killing. If you die after me, I am the direct cause in many, of your death. But if I die first, how can a dead person accumulate a full karma of killing? It's still incredibly negative. It'll have a negative result. But you see, technically, it's not karma of killing. All right. So this has to be kept in mind. So there are four things we've looked at. There's a basis. There's a motivation. There's an action. And the motivation has to involve an afflicted state of mind. negative state of mind, what is called a klesh in Sanskrit. Yeah, a delusion, a disturbed state of mind, anger, attachment, ignorance. Usually with killing, it's there's obviously anger, aggression involved. There can be, of course, envy, jealousy also involved, whatever. If it's crime de passion, as the French say, a crime of passion, then there is, there are other factors also. Okay, so have you got this clear? Say I want to kill a mouse or a rat, the object, the basis, a living being, the rat. Then I have the attitude, basically a kind of aggression. Of course, I can have all kinds of reasons. It's eating my, supplies of rice or whatever. But there is aggression. There's an anger. And of course, there's an ignorance from Buddhist perspective. Not knowing the consequences of killing. We kill because, that rat is eating my stuff. I'm, sick and tired of it. I'm angry. Yeah, and then there's the action of killing with a weapon or, whatever. And then there's, to be a complete action, the rat has to die before I die. So that I have that sense, yeah, it's dead. I killed it. That is a complete action of killing. Otherwise, it's not a complete action of killing. So if you're drunk and disorderly, you don't know what you're doing, and you have a weapon and you kind of just aim it at something aimlessly because you're just drunk and you feel aggressive, you pull the trigger. That's very negative, but it's not a complete karma of killing if you don't really know what you're doing. And if you didn't have any intention to kill someone, then definitely not a complete karma of killing. Is it negative? Yes, it's still negative, but it's not a complete karma of killing. And a complete karma of killing is much more powerful than kind of an incomplete one. That will become clearer and clearer. Any question about that? This applies to all of the 10 that we're going to look at, this kind of stages of basis, affliction, motivation, action or performance of it, and the completion. Thinking, yeah, okay, I've done it. If you've died already, you can't say that. So there's no completion. But usually we don't die before. If we lie to someone and they understand the lie, yeah, it may take them a few seconds or minutes to accept the lie. And usually we stay alive for that time, but possibly it can happen that we don't. So then it wouldn't be a complete lie if I die first and then you believe what I say. Say I speak to you in a foreign language, and then you're looking up Google, what did he mean? And by the time you get the translation, the liar has died, then the liar, the person who lied, doesn't accumulate the complete action of lying. Of course, it's still negative because he had the intention to lie. So that's the main thing. But it's not a complete action. So you don't get the worst kind of result. Stealing, the basis of stealing. What do you think the basis of stealing is? Basis of killing is another living being. What is the basis of stealing? Anyone? No, that's the motivation. What is the basis? The basis for killing was another being. In other words, the object. Well, yeah. Exactly. So the basis of stealing is anything owned by another person. Anything owned by another person. The motivation is the desire to take the thing from another person, even though he or she has not given it to you. And of course, the the affliction is usually greed, but it could be anger. You're angry at someone, so you want to harm them by stealing something from them. Yeah. Yeah. Can be definitely a mixture of anger and greed. Yeah. The performance. So the action itself, like before, the act of stealing could be by robbing, by force, or by theft, or by some tricky means, subterfuge. There are all ways of stealing nowadays, aren't there? All kinds of shell companies and this and that, an incredible rigmarole people go through to hide the fact that they're actually stealing or misusing. Further, whether people engage in deceit about debts and trusts or take what is not given by other deceitful means, whether they act for the sake of their own interests or others' interests or to harm another, these are all equally considered stealing. And the culmination or the final completion of the action, according to one location, one teaching, is moving the object to another location. From where you found it, you take it, or you move the money from one place to another, In the case of things such as khet, fields, you're not going to steal someone's field and move it somewhere else, But it can be stolen in other ways, right? Through fudging the land records and, paying off what are they called? When I'm in Bihar, all these words come to me immediately. But being in Delhi, one doesn't deal with these matters. Sujit ji, what's the name of the person who looks after the land records in Patwari? It's called here, but I think they have another name in Bihar. I can't remember. क्या नाम? हाँ, पटवारी बोलते हैं, but एक और भी नाम है. Tehsildar can be involved, but Sujit ji, can you remember? Who looks after, at the local level, the land records? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Basically, Patwari type. Yeah. So, so by fudging the record, which is very common in Bihar, if you know someone, they can, engage in certain actions for you or all sorts of things. So one can, land mafia is very powerful in certain parts of India. Where we are in Bihar, our project in Bodh Gaya, there's a lot of land mafia, land sharks, because land is so valuable, What used to be, what we bought in 1987 for 6,000 rupees per kattha, which is 1/27th of an acre. The kattha is now 40, 50, 60 lakhs, lakh, not thousand. So you see, stealing people's land is quite popular, but you wouldn't move it to another location. Therefore, in such a case, the culmination would be thinking that you've acquired it. Thinking that you've acquired it. You fudged the records, you paid off the people you need to pay, and the land is now in your name. It's been mutated in your name. Mutation हो गया, वो आपका हो गया, और आप सोच रहे हैं ये तो मेरा हो गया. That's the complete action of stealing. If you die before this process is completed, then you haven't engaged in a complete action of stealing. If you cause another person to rob or cause them to steal, it is enough that the other person has that thought. There's technical stuff here, because he's saying this is like a case in which somebody is killed without your knowledge, but by a person whom you have sent. when the victim dies, the one who caused the murderer to kill incurs an actual sin. These are, you see, again, I remind you, karma comes under the third category of deeply hidden phenomena. You and I being able to look at each other now, we're looking at manifest phenomena, very easy to understand. You know, slightly hidden phenomena would be things like understanding what Buddha means by certain, teachings like the teachings on ultimate truth, emptiness, and so forth, how things exist. But karma is a deeply hidden phenomena. It requires more than just a very brilliant mind or something like that. It requires the awareness of a fully awakened Buddha, it is said, to understand the deepest aspects of karma. So things, there's many of these things we can't quite understand exactly why it would be so. Yeah. Okay. So now we come to another topic, which is very important, another negative karma, sexual misconduct. So, of course, they're not saying any kind of sexual activity is wrong. Of course, between consenting adults, most sexual activity is okay. Sexual misconduct for a monk or nun would mean any kind of sexual conduct. But here he's talking about sexual misconduct for lay people, mainly lay people. So there are four possible bases. In general, what would be the basis of sexual misconduct? For killing, it's another being. For stealing, it's somebody's property. What would it be for sexual misconduct?
Acting against consent. Acting against consent.
I think you haven't understood yet what we mean by basis. The basis is the object with which one engages in that action. So it's another person, basically. So actually, there are four possible bases according to this. You see, they go into this in incredible detail. And also, of course, these teachings, they go into incredible detail because we need to know. Because karma is definite, karma is subtle, so we need to know things at a subtle level, a very detailed level, how it works, just as we would need to know anything properly, to get the right result. Here we're trying to find happiness, right? We're trying to find happiness by giving up unwholesomeness. So, if a person if a mystery is working on your car engine and doesn't know really how it works, then you're not going to be a happy customer who then has a car that starts working again. Everything has to be done very carefully, and so it's like very precise. Nothing is left, not much at least, is left to doubt in these teachings. Just as you can't have a car mechanic who's, you say, "Arey, ho sakta hai ki ye karta hai, ho sakta hai theek ho gaya ho, ye pata nahi ye part kya hai, kya iska kaam hai." You can't have a mechanic like that who doesn't understand your car engine, So you go to the mechanic who understands your motorcycle or car. So here we're saying the Buddha and these great masters, they understand the technicalities of these different non-virtuous actions. Okay, so the four possible bases are a person with whom you shouldn't have intercourse, inappropriate body parts, inappropriate places, and inappropriate times even. They'll explain it. Those with whom, and of course, these are traditional teachings, and of course, if this could create a great, hangama if these teachings were given in exactly this way in public which these are actually. These are being recorded. So often, let me give this, what's it called? Proviso, disclaimer, I don't know. When teachers in the past have given this teaching, they've glossed over it quite quickly because they were usually monks or nuns, and they don't want to talk much about sex in any way, right? So they just say sexual misconduct, adultery. If you engage in adultery, that's sexual misconduct. Don't do that. Okay. Here, the actual teachings in the text go into far greater detail than that. So here, I'm just reading what it says. I'm not giving my personal interpretation or judgment here. So those with whom one should not have intercourse, in the case of men, are women with whom you should not copulate. This is all explained later. All men, so men shouldn't engage in sex with men. And eunuchs. In terms of the first, the women, so these include your mother and those protected by their mothers, those with whom you shouldn't have intercourse. The meaning of this is women who are held by another, those who are religious, nuns or so forth, those who are under the protection of their family or king, a prostitute who has already been taken by another person, you can't then, go with that prostitute, and those who are related to you. These are people whom you shouldn't have sex with. In Buddhism, it's not a sexual misconduct to have sex with a prostitute so long as you pay. Yeah. Of course, it's not a great idea from Buddhists to go and have a lot of sex with prostitutes, but it's not sexual misconduct if you pay, and other things being equal, But if you have sex with a prostitute without paying, that's sexual misconduct. Makes sense. It's a kind of stealing too, isn't it? So those who are held by another means other people's wives. Those who have religious insignia are renunciate women. They may not be having robes and say, I'm a Buddhist nun, but they may have decided they have taken certain vows of celibacy and so forth. So then they also are unsuitable objects. Those protected by the family are those who have not yet become brides, and they are protected by kinsfolk such as their fathers, or who father-in-law, mother-in-law, protected by a god, or who, in the absence of these, are protected even by themselves. Those protected by a king or his representatives are those concerning whom a punitive law has been laid down. The line stating that sex with a prostitute for whom another has paid is sexual misconduct shows there's no sexual misconduct in hiring a prostitute yourself. Again, and now many teachers would not talk about this next line, or well, they would talk about it in a way suitable for their audience because they know that it's very contentious. Men, the second in the list of those with whom you should not have intercourse, refers both to oneself and to others, other men. Inappropriate body parts are parts other than the vagina. It's very technical, yeah. It's very clear. What are inappropriate body parts? The mouth, the anus, the calves, thighs pressed together, the hand in motion. There's a lot here, right? Inappropriate places. This makes some sense. It all makes sense. This also makes sense. Inappropriate places are areas such as in the vicinity of your guru, a place where there is a stupa. Or, stupa is a very holy religious object, symbolizing the mind of the Buddha. In the presence of many people, and on uneven or hard places that are harmful to the person with whom you're having intercourse. That's very considerate, right? So you may have seen period historical serials or movies. In the old days, it was traditional. I think it was quite traditional that amongst royalty, they should have sex and other people should watch to show that it has been consummated, right? Oh, God. It's like, somebody making a porn movie or something. Anyway, that is also inappropriate place. Don't do it in front of a lot of people. Also, inappropriate times is when a woman is menstruating, when she's at the end of a term of pregnancy, when she has an infant who is nursing, if she were to be observing a one-day vow. There are one-day vows in this tradition where you vow for one day, 24 hours, to abstain from, among other things, any kind of sex. So if she's observing that, you cannot force her to have sex. I mean, that would be misconduct. When she has an illness, which makes sexual intercourse inappropriate. It's also inappropriate in excess of a proper amount. So proper amount is having intercourse up to 5 times a night. More than that, sexual misconduct. They could be very, very detailed, these old masters. Inappropriate times when a woman is menstruating, pregnant, has an infant, is unwilling, is in pain, or is unhappy and the like, or is maintaining the one-day vow. Atisha, the great originator of these kind of teachings, is similar to the great scholar Ashwaghosh, with the difference that he says daytime is also an inappropriate time. So you can see how this goes against modern norms, right? Jab marzi karo, kind of. But there's meaning to all of these things. There is, if we think about these things carefully, there could be, we could see more reasons for all of these things. And if you want another take on this, you might think, oh, Buddhism is so hardline. So read what Taoism, Taoist teachings have to say about sex. Then you'll see that Buddhism isn't alone in having certain, ways of talking about it. Okay, so given that the 3 bases, using inappropriate body parts or inappropriate place, inappropriate time, become sexual misconduct, even if in regard to your own wife or husband, it's certainly the case then that they become sexual misconduct in regard to other people. So you can't say, oh, I'm not having adultery, so it's okay. No, it could be inappropriate body part, inappropriate time, inappropriate place. They've all got to be kosher. So you can see how modern world is, from this perspective, a cesspit of sexual misconduct. Okay. What would be the main motivation? Again, mainly desire, attachment, sometimes aggression, of course, with rape. It's aggression, largely, given its great preponderance in times of war. It's used as a way of harming. Yeah. Motivation, according to this text, is desire due to unchastity to copulate. What is the culmination? What is the completion of the action? Culmination is the sexual union of the 2 parts of the body. Some texts say orgasm, but sexual union with two parts. Okay. Almost 8 o'clock. Next one will be lying. Okay, we'll talk about lying on Sunday. So we had a very meaty session. Any questions? Hold on, there is something online, I see. Lekpal. Okay, Lekpal, huh? Lekpal, I've heard that word. Thank you, Sujiti. Lekpal, for the person who does the land records. So any comments, any questions? You can't accuse the text of not being detailed and clear. If one studies it, then one can't say, oh, I don't understand what killing is. I don't know what stealing is. It's very clear. But yeah, it's obviously, his traditional teachings don't seem to be very tolerant of homosexuality. Lesbianism, they're not talking about, it seems, which makes sense. They're mainly monks who are the scholars of these texts, and Buddha and commentators. So, and according to Taoism, for your information, and again, it's good to check these things. I mean, when I say check, I mean think about them and so forth, reflect. Taoism also comes down hard on homosexuality, but not on lesbianism. And there could be reasons for that. I don't know. Okay. So anyway, it's good to remember that all these teachings, as I said before, they are to help us develop a calm, clear, kind mind, which avoids unwholesomeness for others' sake and for our own sake, obviously. Because you see, if we kill someone, even a fish, from a Buddhist perspective, if we don't regret it and engage in purification practices, the karma magnifies. The karma of killing magnifies. So that if you leave it unpurified, it just the karma becomes stronger, 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 and gives a horrendous result. Not to the fish, but to us. Gives a horrendous result to us. Yeah. That's what happens. That's why we have to engage in this for our own sake, in one way, mainly for our own sake. Yeah. You're in time for the dedication. How was Jahana Beglu? The guy called Jahana Beglu, did he speak? Jahana Beglu?
The speaker? Yeah, it was great.
What I've read of this guy is very good. Okay, our resident volunteer has just returned from a tryst with Gandhi. Of course, Gandhi is interesting, isn't it? In terms of this last topic we've just been discussing. Very unusual. Oh, sorry?
They have an exhibition as well.
Exhibition, yeah. You should have stayed for that. Why didn't you stay for that? You wanted to come for the dedication. Roy Saab is mentioning Chogyam Trungpa had an active sexual life. He was a great master. Would it constitute misconduct despite that he was very highly realized? So does misconduct really? This is a good question. Pity you brought it up at 8 p.m. But yeah, that's my fault for talking till 8 p.m. Yeah, hard to, when one of Lama Yeshe's students criticized Chogyam Trungpa for drinking alcohol, which he did, then Lama Yeshe, because they'd just gone to meet Trungpa, Lama Yeshe, the founder of Tushita and all, had gone with some of his students. Lama Yeshe was a traditional Gelugpa monk, very strict vows, and of course never drank alcohol. But when this student criticized Trungpa after the meeting for having been drinking alcohol during the meeting, Lama Yeshe really scolded that student very strongly, saying, don't criticize something you don't understand. You're not capable of understanding what Trungpa's mind is, how realized he is. So don't criticize what you are not capable of really understanding. So yeah, I can't comment right now, but I have a great admiration for Trungpa Rinpoche. If he had sex with some of his students, it depends, doesn't it? The main factor in karma is the intention. If there's no affliction involved, if there's no distorted emotion involved, then it is not sexual misconduct or killing or anything. Like the bodhisattva who killed, and it turned out to be a positive action, because he killed somebody who was going to kill other people, and he did it with great compassion and wisdom and without any iota of aggression. It was total compassion. So you see, if you have that level of mind, then of course you cannot commit really any kind of misconduct, technically speaking. If you don't have any delusions in your mind and act always from wisdom and compassion, then you're not going to be committing any kind of misconduct. Whatever you do will be motivated by the wishing to benefit others and by wisdom. So yeah, that's something else. But yeah, it's a contentious issue, and as we know, there were many complications in Trungpa's organization after he died, due to what was obviously misconduct by some of his students, very clearly it seems, which is a great shame. Okay, there's a lot more. We can have more questions on Sunday morning session, if necessary. Meanwhile, let's dedicate, and we can be very happy to dedicate, because you see, clarity is such a great thing, isn't it? When there is room for a lot of doubt about things, then there's also room, it means, for confusion, for wrong action, and so forth. We should at least be happy that we are being given something which is very clear, most of it, and which we can then reflect on, of course. And we should realize that these teachings are given by these great masters and originally by the Buddha for our benefit. That we always have to remember. Of course, the teachings, like any good medicine, powerful medicine, can be, of course, distasteful in the beginning, can't they? Very hard to swallow, very hard, very bitter medicine. Dangerous and for our ego. Ego meaning our habitual patterns, our ignorance, our conditioning. Obviously, they're meant to totally decondition us, make us into awakened beings. So how could the teachings not be disturbing in the beginning? How could a surgical operation to remove a cancer not be disturbing in some ways, Of course it's disturbing. Teachings have to be disturbing to the ego, to the ignorance, to the habitual unwholesomeness that we engage in. Of course. So, these are not cloud cuckoo land teachings about merging with, merging with something, merging with, what do we merge with in New Age spirituality? The cosmos, many things. I'm being a little bit not nice, but just space out, man. Just it's all bliss. No, it's okay to bliss out sometimes, but then we have to come back to earth and our crappy everyday mind, which is leading us into disturbing directions very regularly. So, of course, we have to take care. Anyway, so let's dedicate for the happiness and welfare of all beings. In this degenerate time, may people take more cognizance of karma, how they're behaving, and thus create more causes for happiness, and cut at the root the causes for suffering. May we never be separated from authentic teachings and teachers. May all of them have long and healthy lives. May all who are suffering due to sickness and so forth be freed from their suffering. As Shantideva says in his dedication of his great work, may all those who are engaging in travel and so forth meet with no obstacles. May they be free of the danger of tigers and lions, he says. So in terms of modern travelers, may they be saved from the dangers of cancellations and delays and fog and impertinent airport officials or whatever it is, flat tires, dangerous roads, floods, and so forth. And then we can dedicate that our teachers have long and healthy lives, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama and other great teachers who are helping so many beings with their teachings. And then we can also dedicate for all the beings who are trying to benefit and help others, wherever they are, whoever they are. And of course, we can dedicate for, again, as Shantideva says, for beings to think of benefiting one another. It's amazing how many of us are not benefiting one another. It is harming, confusing one another, What a waste of this human life. And may Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our dear teacher who guided the organization and taught so many beings from the late 60s, early 70s up till earlier this year. May he be quickly, may his rebirth quickly appear, his reincarnation, in order to guide us again in the future. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we went a little bit over time today. Hope to see some of you on Sunday.